The massive conference hall on Nexus Prime had never seen anything like this before. Representatives from 26 different species sat around the circular chamber, their voices creating a symphony of different languages and sounds. Some spoke, in musical tones, others in harsh clicks and whistles. The universal translators worked overtime to make sense of it all. Ambassador Kim Tae-hyun adjusted his dark blue uniform and looked around the room. As Earth's representative, he felt the weight of his entire species on his shoulders. The humans were the newest members of the Galactic Council, having joined only 50 years ago. Most of the other species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. "The reports are confirmed," announced Council Speaker Veltar, a tall being with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like oil. "The Devourer fleet has consumed the entire Helios system. 3 billion lives lost, 12 planets, stripped of all matter." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Tae-hyun had seen the footage. The Devourers were not living beings but massive mechanical ships that ate everything in their path. They broke down planets, stars, and even space stations into basic materials to build more of themselves. No one knew where they came from or why they had suddenly appeared at the edge of the galaxy. "How many ships do they have now?" asked Commander Zethlock of the Kelthani Empire. The warrior species was known throughout the galaxy for their honor and fighting skills. Zethalock's scarred face showed no fear, but Tae-hyun could see worry in his golden eyes. "Our scouts report over 50,000 vessels," replied Admiral Nixandra of the Vorthak Confederation. "Her people had the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Their energy shields could stop almost any weapon. Each ship is the size of a small moon. They move as one unit, perfectly coordinated." Tae-hyun raised his hand. "What about their weaknesses? Every machine has flaws." Some of the older species looked at him with what might have been amusement. The Mindari representative, a floating being made of pure energy, spoke directly into everyone's minds. "Young human, the Devourers have been active for over 1,000,000 years. They have consumed entire galaxies. If they had weaknesses, someone would have found them by now." "But they have never faced all of us working together," Tae-hyun said, standing. 26 species, all our fleets combined. That has to count for something." Elder Mordak of the ancient Voidwalkers tapped his staff on the floor. His species was so old that they remembered when stars were young. "The human speaks truth. Alone we fall. Together we might stand." The next few hours were spent planning the largest military operation in galactic history. Each species would contribute their best ships and their greatest strengths. The Kelthani would provide their massive battleships and fearless warriors. The Vorthak would share their shield technology and energy weapons. The Mindari would use their psychic powers to coordinate the entire fleet. Humanity's contribution seemed small compared to the others. Earth had only 500 ships, while some species brought thousands. But Tae-hyun promised that every human ship would fight to the end. Captain Park Ji-yeon sat in the command chair of the Indomitable, humanity's newest and largest warship. Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly, checking systems and preparing for battle. Through the main view screen, she could see the most incredible sight in galactic history. 10,000 ships from 26 different species floated in perfect formation. Kelthani dreadnoughts, each one a kilometer long, drifted next to sleek Vorthak cruisers that glowed with contained energy. Strange Mindari vessels that looked more like living beings than machines pulsed with psychic power. Human ships, smaller but packed with weapons, held their position in the formation. "Captain, we are receiving the final battle plan from Fleet Command," reported Lieutenant Yoon Heron at the communication station. Ji-yeon nodded. "Put it on screen." The tactical display showed the Sigma Draconis system, where the Devourers had been detected moving toward a colony world with 2 million inhabitants. The Allied fleet would jump in and hit them hard before they could strip the system clean. "All ships, this is Admiral Korvash commanding the Allied fleet," came the voice over the communication system. The Kelthani admiral was famous for never losing a battle. "Today we make history. Today we show these machines that the living galaxy will not go quietly into the dark. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump." The space around the Allied fleet began to twist and bend. Stars stretched into lines of light as 10,000 ships disappeared from normal space. They emerged in the Sigma Draconis system to find exactly what the scouts had reported. Hundreds of massive devourer ships were systematically breaking apart, the outer planets. Each mechanical vessel was dark gray and covered in strange symbols. They moved with mechanical precision, like parts of a giant machine. "By the ancestors," whispered Commander Tae-Min-soo at the tactical station. "Look at the size of them." The smallest devourer ships were larger than any human battleship. The largest were the size of small moons, their surfaces covered in weapons and mining equipment. They had already stripped 2 planets down to nothing but empty space. "All ships attack Formation Delta," ordered Admiral Korvash. "Kelthani battleships, advance and engage. Forthak cruisers, provide shield support. Mindari vessels, coordinate targeting. All other ships, support the main attack." The battle began like a beautiful and terrible dance. Kelthani ships charged forward, their heavy guns firing massive rounds that could crack planets. Forthak vessels formed a protective wall, their energy shields absorbing return fire. Mindari ships used their psychic powers to predict enemy movements and guide allied attacks. The human ships found their place in the formation, using their speed and smaller size to strike at devourer weak points. Captain Ji-yeon led 3 human squadrons in the attack run against a medium-sized enemy vessel. "Target their command section," she ordered. "All ships concentrate fire." Human plasma cannons and railguns fired together, punching holes in the devourer's armor. The massive ship shuddered and began to list to one side, dark fluids leaking from the wounds. Across the battlefield, the Allied attack was working. Devourer ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Others were crippled and began drifting, helplessly. For the first time in galactic history, the mechanical swarm was taking serious damage. But the Devourers were not finished. As the Allied fleet celebrated their early success, the enemy ships began to change. Their formation shifted, their weapons adjusted, their tactics evolved. The machines were learning. "Captain, enemy ships are adapting to our attack patterns," reported the tactical officer. Ji-yeon watched as Devourer vessels began to counter every Allied strategy. They adjusted their armor to resist Kelthani guns, modified their shields to stop Forthak energy beams, and used electronic warfare to disrupt Mindari psychic coordination. The Allied fleet found themselves fighting an enemy that grew stronger with every passing minute. What had started as a glorious victory was becoming a desperate struggle for survival. "All ships, new orders from Fleet Command," came the voice over communications. "The enemy is adapting faster than expected. We are falling back to defensive positions." As the Allied fleet retreated, Captain Ji-yeon stared at the tactical display. They had won the first round, but the Devourers had learned from their defeat. Next time the machines would be ready. She did not know it yet, but she was watching the beginning of the end for the Grand Alliance. 3 months had passed since the battle at Sigma Draconis, and the war was not going well. Lieutenant Commander Lee Min-ho stood on the observation deck of the research vessel Discovery, watching the refugee ships pass by like ghosts in the darkness of space. The ships were from a dozen different species, all fleeing from worlds that no longer existed. The Devourers had not stopped learning since that first battle. Every victory the Alliance won was quickly countered. Every new weapon was adapted against. Every strategy was turned into a weakness. "Commander Lee, you need to see this," called Dr. Song Ji-hye from the communications station. Her voice was tight with worry. Min-ho walked over and looked at the display screen. It showed a star map of the galaxy with red markers showing Devourer positions. The red area had grown much larger in just the past week. The Kelthani homeworld of Korth Prime went silent 12 hours ago, Dr. Song reported. Their entire star system, no communications, no life signs, nothing. Minho felt his stomach drop. The Kelthani were the strongest warriors in the galaxy. If they could not defend their own home, what hope did anyone else have? "What about their fleet?" he asked. "Scattered," Song replied. "The survivors are running in every direction. Some are trying to reach their colony worlds, others are just fleeing to the outer rim." Through the Discovery's windows, Minho could see one of those fleeing ships now. It was a Kelthani heavy cruiser, but it looked nothing like the proud warships. He had fought beside months ago. Its hull was scarred and blackened, its weapon ports dark and empty. The communication system crackled to life. "This is Commander Zethlock of the Kelthani vessel Honor's Edge. We request permission to join your convoy." Minho recognized the name. Zethlock had been at the council meeting where this whole alliance was formed. Now he sounded like a broken man. "Permission granted, Commander," Minho replied. "Welcome to what is left of the fight." Over the next few days, more bad news arrived. The Vorthak had pulled all their ships back to their core systems, abandoning dozens of colony worlds. The Mindari psychic network was falling apart as panic and fear spread through their collective consciousness. 3 smaller species had disappeared completely, their representatives simply vanishing from the Allied command structure. Dr. Bae Yunji, Earth's leading expert on alien species, was working around the clock in her laboratory aboard the Discovery. She had intercepted communications from various species, and what she found made her heart sink. "They are calling us fools," she told Minho during one of their daily briefings. "The Kelthani survivors refer to humans as the last dead walking. The Vorthak diplomatic channels speak of us as tomorrow's extinct species. They think we are too stupid to know when we are beaten." Minho looked at the data on his tablet. Earth's fleet was still fighting, still taking the battle to the enemy. But they were practically alone now. Of the original 26 species alliance, only 8 were still actively fighting. The others had either fled or were trying to negotiate separate peace deals with the Devourers. "Admiral Cho Hyunwoo wants to see all senior staff," announced Lieutenant Park Sun-ho from the door. "Emergency meeting in Conference Room 1. The conference room was smaller than the grand chambers on Nexus Prime, but the handful of officers present represented all that was left of humanity's war effort. Admiral Cho sat at the head of the table, his face showing the strain of months of constant battle. "I will be direct," the Admiral began. "We are losing this war. Our allies are abandoning us one by one. The enemy adapts to every strategy we use. Earth Command is asking me to consider a full retreat to the Sol system." Captain Park Jian leaned forward. "Admiral, if we retreat to Earth, we will only be delaying the inevitable. The Devourers will follow us." "I know that, Captain," Cho replied. "But we may not have a choice. Look at these numbers." The holographic display showed the current state of the human fleet. Of the 500 ships they had started with, only 230 remained combat-ready. The others had been destroyed or were too damaged to fight. "Sir," said Commander Yang Sujin from the research vessel Pioneer, "my team has been studying the Devourer wreckage from our battles. We think we have found something important." All eyes turned to her. Yang was known for her brilliant tactical mind and her ability to see patterns that others missed. "The Devourers learn from defeat, but they have a weakness," she continued. "They cannot properly adapt to strategies that succeed against them. Their programming assumes that successful tactics will be used again, so they prepare defenses. But what if we use tactics that were designed to succeed once and then never be repeated?" Admiral Cho frowned. "Explain." "Imagine we attack a Devourer formation using strategy A. They adapt and develop counter-strategy A. Next time we use strategy B, which is completely different. They adapt to that too. But then, instead of using strategy C, we go back to strategy A. Their current defenses are designed to stop strategy B, not A." Dr. Bay looked up from her notes. "That would require us to have perfect intelligence on their adaptation patterns, and it would mean accepting heavy losses in our initial attacks just to gather that intelligence." "Yes," Yang admitted. "It would be costly, very costly." The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. They were talking about deliberately losing battles in order to win the war. It would mean sacrificing ships and crews to gather information. "There is something else," said Captain Lee Hagen, who commanded one of the human scout fleets. "I have been monitoring enemy communications. The Devourers are becoming more confident. They are splitting their forces, sending smaller groups to hunt down the scattered Allied fleets." Admiral Cho stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars looked cold and distant. "If we do this plan," he said slowly, "we will have to fight alone. The other species think we are crazy for not surrendering. They will not support suicide attacks. Then we fight alone, Captain Park said firmly. We have done it before. Not like this, the Admiral replied. Not against an enemy that outnumbers us 50 to 1 and grows stronger every day. Lieutenant, Commander Minho spoke up. Admiral, my grandmother used to tell me an old Korean saying, "The bamboo that bends in the storm survives while the mighty oak breaks." Maybe it is time for humanity to stop trying to be the oak. Admiral Cho turned back to face the room. You want us to bend, to break, to lose on purpose so that we can eventually win? Yes, sir, Commander Yang said. But we need to be smart about it. We need to make our defeats look real while gathering the intelligence we need to destroy them. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Through the conference room windows, they could see another refugee ship passing by. This one was from a species Minho did not recognize, probably one of the smaller civilizations that were already extinct. Very well, Admiral Cho said finally. We will prepare for Operation Wildfire. But understand this, all of you. We are about to embark on a path that will make us pariahs in the galaxy. The other species already think we are fools. After this, they will think we are monsters. Better to be living monsters than noble corpses, Captain Park replied. As the meeting broke up, Minho returned to the observation deck. The refugee ships were still passing by, carrying the survivors of a dozen different worlds. Soon, he knew, there would be no more refugee ships. There would be no more survivors, unless humanity's desperate gamble worked, unless the fools and monsters could find a way to make the galaxy's most powerful enemy destroy itself. The war was entering a new phase, and humanity was about to discover just how far they were willing to go to survive. The fall of Nexus Prime took only 3 days. Captain Park Ji-un watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as the Great Council world burned. The massive space stations that had orbited the planet for thousands of years were now twisted wreckage. The Devourers had not just conquered the system, they had erased it from existence. Captain, we are receiving a final transmission from Vorthak Command, reported Communications Officer Kim Da-yoon. The main screen flickered and showed Admiral Nixandra, the same Vorthak leader who had seemed so confident months ago. Now she looked tired and defeated. Attention all remaining Allied forces, she said. The Vorthak Confederation is implementing Protocol 7. All our ships are withdrawing to the core systems for final defensive operations. To our human allies, you have fought bravely and with honor. Your species has shown courage beyond measure. But this war cannot be won. Accept reality and save what you can. Flee to the Rim territories while you still have ships left. The transmission ended, leaving silence on the bridge. Sir, said Lieutenant Commander Yoon Dae-ho at the tactical station. That was the last of them. Every species has now either fled or fallen silent. Ji-yeon nodded slowly. Of the 26 species that had formed the Grand Alliance, humanity now stood completely alone. The Kelthani were scattered and broken. The Vorthak had retreated to their fortress worlds. The Mindari Collective had shattered into fragments. Every other species had either been destroyed or had simply vanished into the darkness between stars. Set course for the Pioneer, she ordered. Commander Yang's research ship should be at the coordinates we agreed on. The human fleet, what was left of it, had gathered in an empty system far from any inhabited worlds. Only 112 ships remained from the original 500. They floated in space like lonely islands, in an ocean of darkness. Commander, Yang Soo-jin stood in the laboratory of the research vessel Pioneer, surrounded by pieces of Devourer technology. Her team had been working for weeks to understand the enemy's adaptation systems. Now, with humanity standing alone, their work was more important than ever. Commander, Admiral Cho's shuttle is requesting permission to dock, announced Lieutenant Seo Min-jae. Granted, Yang replied without looking up from her work. Minutes later, Admiral Cho Hyun-woo entered the lab with Captain Park and several other senior officers. The Admiral looked older than when this war had started, but his eyes still held determination. "Show me what you have found," he said simply. Yang activated the holographic display. It showed a 3-dimensional model of a Devourer ship's computer, Core. The enemy learns through quantum processing networks, she explained. Every battle, every weapon they encounter, every tactic used against them is analyzed and countermeasures are developed. But there is a flaw in their system. She highlighted a section of the hologram. They can only run one adaptation cycle at a time. If we can overload them with multiple different strategies simultaneously, their systems will freeze for approximately 14 seconds while they process the conflicting data. 14 seconds, Admiral Cho repeated. That is not much time. It is enough, Captain Park said. If we hit them with everything we have in those 14 seconds. Yang nodded. But there is more. I have discovered how to trigger the overload. We need to use tactics that they have already adapted to, but in combinations that their programming cannot predict. She brought up another display showing battle formations and weapon patterns. For example, if we use Kelthani frontal assault, tactics combined with Vorthak shield rotation patterns and Mindari psychic coordination, all at the same time, their systems will not know which countermeasure to prioritize. That means we need to have perfect knowledge of their previous adaptations, said Commander Lee Minho, who had joined them from the Discovery, which means we need to lose battles on purpose to study their responses, Admiral Cho concluded. The room fell quiet. Everyone knew what this meant. Human ships and crews would have to sacrifice themselves, not to win battles, but to gather intelligence. There is one more thing, Yang said quietly. For this to work, we need to attack their core systems. The outlying fleets are controlled by simple programming. The real intelligence, the adaptation networks, are in the ships closest to their command centers. You want us to attack their strongest positions, Captain Park said. Yes, and we need to do it while appearing to be making desperate last stands. They must believe we are throwing everything we have at them in hopeless final battles. Admiral Cho walked to the window and stared out at the small human fleet. Each ship represented thousands of lives, families, entire communities. He was being asked to gamble all of it on a theory. Admiral, said a voice from behind him. Dr. Bei Yunji had entered the lab quietly. I have been monitoring communications from the colonies. Earth is preparing for evacuation. The government wants to load the population onto colony ships and flee to the Andromeda Galaxy. Running away, Cho said bitterly. No, sir, Dr. Bei replied. They are trying to save humanity. But if they run, if we all run, then the devourers will eventually follow. There is nowhere to hide from an enemy that consumes galaxies. The Admiral turned back to the assembled officers. How many colonies have volunteered to serve as bait? Commander Yang checked her notes. 17 so far. They know they will be destroyed. But they want to help gather intelligence. And our crews? Captain Park answered immediately. Every ship, sir. When I explained the plan, not a single crew member requested transfer. They all volunteered for the suicide missions. Admiral Cho felt a strange pride mixed with grief. This was what humanity had become in the face of extinction. Not heroes, perhaps, but something more stubborn than heroes. They were too stubborn to quit, too angry to surrender, and too clever to die easily. Very well, he said. We begin Operation Wildfire in 72 hours. Commander Yang, I want detailed battle plans for each phase. Captain Park, coordinate with the colony volunteers. Dr. Bei, monitor all communications channels. If any of our former allies change their minds and want to help, I want to know immediately. As the officers filed out to prepare their ships, Yang remained behind with the Admiral. Sir, there is something else I need to tell you, she said. The Devourers have been broadcasting on a frequency that most species cannot detect. My equipment picked it up by accident. She activated another display. They are not just consuming matter and energy. They are collecting information. Every species they destroy, every planet they consume, the data is stored in their central networks. What kind of data? Everything. History, culture, technology, genetic patterns. They are building a complete record of galactic civilization. Admiral Cho stared at the data. Why would machines want to preserve what they destroy? I do not know, sir, but it might be important. The Admiral nodded slowly. There were so many questions about the Devourers that had no answers. Where did they come from? What was their ultimate goal? Why had they suddenly appeared after millions of years of silence? But those questions would have to wait. Right now, humanity had a war to fight and a species to save. 3 days later, the first phase of Operation Wildfire began. Human colony ships broadcast false distress signals, pretending to be helpless refugees. When the Devourers arrived to consume them, human warships attacked using obsolete Kelthani tactics. The battle was a slaughter. The human ships were destroyed almost immediately, their crews dying in the cold vacuum of space. But as they died, their sensor equipment recorded everything. Every weapon the Devourers used, every adaptation they made, every tactical decision they implemented. The data was transmitted to the surviving human ships before the vessels were destroyed. Another piece of the puzzle was added to Commander Yang's growing understanding of the enemy. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human colonies that had stood for decades were sacrificed to gather intelligence. Brave crews flew their ships into obvious traps, recording data until the very moment their hulls were cracked open. The other species watched in horror as humanity seemed to go insane, throwing away ships and lives in hopeless attacks. The few remaining Allied representatives sent messages begging the humans to stop their suicidal behavior. But the humans did not stop. They could not stop. Because buried in all that data, in all those recorded deaths, Commander Yang was finding patterns. The enemy was predictable. They could be trapped. They could be beaten. Humanity just had to be willing to pay the price in blood to learn how. Captain Nam Ji-hoon checked his weapons one last time as his squadron approached the Orion Nebula. Behind him, 24 human ships flew in perfect formation toward what everyone knew was a suicide mission. "Captain, we are detecting massive Devourer presence ahead," reported Lieutenant Oh Sung-min at the sensor station. "Over 300 vessels, including several command ships." "Understood," Ji-hoon replied calmly. "All ships, remember the plan. We hit them hard and fast with Kelthani Assault Pattern 7. Make it look like we believe we can win." Through his bridge windows, Ji-hoon could see the Devourer staging area ahead. Massive mechanical ships floated in geometric formations around a captured star system. They had stripped 4 planets down to nothing but dust, and were using the raw materials to build even more ships. "Sir, incoming transmission from Admiral Cho," announced the communications officer. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired but determined. "This is Admiral Cho to all wildfire units, remember. You are not dying for nothing. Every second of data you transmit brings us closer to victory. The galaxy will remember your sacrifice." "Understood, Admiral," Ji-hoon replied. Wildfire 1 beginning attack run. The human ships accelerated toward the enemy formation. Ji-hoon had studied the Kelthani battle tactics for weeks. The warrior species had always believed in direct frontal assault, using heavy weapons and thick armor to smash through enemy lines. It was exactly the kind of attack the Devourers had learned to counter months ago. "All ships weapons free," Ji-hoon ordered. "For humanity and for Earth." The human ships opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons and railguns sent streams of energy and metal toward the Devourer fleet. The enemy ships immediately began to adapt, their armor shifting and changing to absorb the human weapons. "They are adapting to our attack patterns," reported the tactical officer. "Enemy return fire incoming." The space around Ji-hoon's squadron exploded with enemy weapons fire. Devourer ships launched swarms of hunter-killer drones while their main guns fired beams of pure energy. The human ships, using outdated Kelthani tactics, flew straight into the trap. One by one, the human vessels began to explode. The ship next to Ji-hoon's disappeared in a flash of light. Another was cut in half by a Devourer energy beam. A third was overwhelmed by enemy drones and torn apart piece by piece. "Sir, we have lost 18 ships," reported Oh Sung-min. "Hull integrity at 40%. Shields are gone." "Keep firing," Ji-hoon ordered. "Keep recording. Every second counts." His ship shuddered as enemy weapons tore through the armor. Systems failed one by one. the bridge filled with smoke and the smell of burning electronics. "Data transmission complete," announced the communications officer just before a devourer beam cut through the bridge. Captain Nam Ji-hoon died believing his sacrifice was pointless. He never knew that his death was exactly what Commander Yang Soo-jin had been waiting for. 47 light-years away, Yang stood in the command center of a hidden asteroid base, watching the incoming data from Ji-hoon's final battle. Around her, dozens of technicians analyzed every detail of the devourer response. "Perfect," she said quietly. "They used adaptation sequence Gamma 7, just as predicted. Commander Yoon, are you ready?" Commander Yoon Da-hee floated in space 3 light hours away from the battle site, her stealth squadron hidden behind a sensor-dampening field. They had been waiting in complete silence for 2 hours, watching as Ji-hoon's ships were systematically destroyed. "All stealth units ready," she reported over the secure channel. "Devourer formation is exactly where you predicted." Yang smiled grimly. The enemy's adaptation patterns were becoming clear. When attacked with Kelthani frontal assault tactics, they always repositioned their command ships to the rear of the formation and concentrated their defensive fire forward. "Begin Phase 2, Yang ordered. Yoon's squadron activated their engines and began their approach from directly behind the Devourer formation. The enemy ships were still celebrating their victory over Ji-hoon's squadron, their sensors focused on Neu, the debris field ahead of them. "Initiating Vorthak shield rotation pattern 12, Yoon reported. "Weapons charging." The human stealth ships suddenly appeared on Devourer sensors, like ghosts materializing from nothing. But instead of using simple human tactics, they fought like Vorthak cruisers, rotating their shield frequencies and firing coordinated energy bursts. The Devourer ships tried to adapt, but their programming was confused. They had just finished adapting to counter Kelthani assault tactics. Now they were facing completely different Vorthak energy patterns. Their systems froze for precious seconds as they tried to process the conflicting data. "All ships target the command vessels," Yoon ordered. "Maximum firepower." In those few seconds of confusion, the human ships poured everything they had into the Devourer command centers. Massive explosions rippled through the enemy formation as critical systems were destroyed. "Direct hits on 3 command ships," reported Lieutenant Park Hee-jin. "Enemy coordination is breaking down." The Devourer fleet began to scatter as their local command network was disrupted. Without central coordination, the individual ships reverted to simple defensive patterns. "Phase 2 complete," Yoon reported. "Retreating to safe distance." Yang watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The gambit had worked. By sacrificing Ji-hoon's squadron to trigger a specific adaptation pattern, they had positioned the enemy exactly where Yoon's stealth attack would be most effective. But this was only the beginning. Over the next 6 weeks, similar attacks took place across 12 star systems. Human ships would assault Devourer positions using one set of tactics, apparently failing and dying in the process. Then, hours or days later, a second wave would strike using completely different methods, exploiting the enemy's previous adaptations. Major Kim Yuna led ground forces that captured a Devourer repair facility using what appeared to be desperate Mindari psychic assault tactics. When the enemy adapted to counter psychic attacks, Captain Seo Junsu's squadron hit them from orbit using traditional human bombardment patterns. Each victory taught humanity more about their enemy. Each defeat was actually a setup for the next attack. The Devourers, for all their intelligence, could not understand that a species would deliberately lose battles to gather information. The turning point came during the Battle of Wolf 359. Commander Lee Haejin's scout fleet had been tracking a massive Devourer construction operation. The enemy was building something huge, a ship that dwarfed even their largest command vessels. "It is over 1,000 kilometers long," Haejin reported to Admiral Cho. "Whatever they are building, it is important enough to pull ships from a dozen systems to protect it." Yang studied the tactical data. The Devourers had positioned their most advanced ships around the construction site, using adaptation patterns they had learned from months of fighting humans. "They are expecting us," she realized. "This is a trap. They want us to attack so they can destroy the remainder of our fleet." Admiral Cho looked at the display. Then we give them what they want, but not in the way they expect. The final phase of Operation Wildfire began with what appeared to be humanity's last desperate gamble. Every remaining human ship, 97 vessels carrying the last of Earth's military forces, jumped into the Wolf 359 system. The Devourers were ready for them. Thousands of enemy ships waited in perfect formation, their weapons charged and their defenses optimized for every human tactic that had been used in the war. All ships, attack formation, Omega Admiral Cho ordered. Let them see us coming. The human fleet charged directly toward the enemy, using a combination of Kelthani, Vorthak, and Mindari tactics all at the same time. It was the most complex battle formation ever attempted, requiring perfect coordination between every ship. The Devourer adaptation systems went insane trying to process the conflicting patterns. Their quantum processors overloaded as they tried to counter 3 different tactical approaches simultaneously. For 14 seconds, the entire enemy fleet was paralyzed. In those 14 seconds, 97 human ships fired everything they had at the massive construction project. Nuclear missiles, plasma beams, railgun rounds, and exotic energy weapons all struck the unfinished supership at once. The explosion could be seen from 3 star systems away. When the light faded, the Devourer construction facility was gone. The massive ship they had been building was reduced to scattered atoms. More importantly, the blast had damaged hundreds of enemy vessels and disrupted their command network across the entire sector. Sir, we are detecting Devourer fleet movements throughout the region, reported Captain Park from the Indomitable. They are retreating. For the first time in the war, humanity had not just won a battle, they had forced the enemy to run away. Yang looked at her tactical display with a mixture of pride and grief. The plan had worked, but at a terrible cost. Thousands of human lives had been sacrificed to reach this moment. Entire colonies had been destroyed to gather the intelligence needed for victory. Commander Yang, you need to see this, called Dr. Bay from her monitoring station. We are receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. The communications display showed dozens of incoming messages. They were from Kelthani survivors, scattered Vorthak vessels, fragments of the Mindari collective, and representatives of species that had been written off as extinct. The news traveled faster than light across the galaxy. Humanity had done the impossible. They had defeated a Devourer superconstruction project and forced an entire enemy fleet to retreat. For the first time since the war began, the mechanical swarm had been stopped. Captain Lee Hagen stood on the bridge of her scout ship Pathfinder, watching as alien vessels approached from all directions. Ships that had been hiding in the depths of space, survivors that had been fleeing for months, fragments of fleets that everyone thought were destroyed. Captain, we have 17 different species requesting permission to join our formation, reported Communications Officer Lim Yujin, including some I do not recognize. How many ships total? Hagen asked. Over 400, sir, and more, arriving every hour. Through the bridge windows, Hagen could see the growing fleet. Kelthani heavy cruisers flying alongside Vorthak science vessels, small ships from species she had never heard of, probably survivors from worlds that had been consumed months ago. But the humans were clearly in command. This is Admiral Cho to all approaching vessels, came the announcement over the fleet communications network. Welcome back to the fight. But understand this, we do things differently now. You will fight under human command, using human tactics, or you will leave. Some of the alien captains were not happy about taking orders from the species they had abandoned. Hagen listened to their complaints over the communication channels. The humans are mad, transmitted one Vorthak commander. Their tactics require accepting massive casualties. They sacrifice their own ships like pieces on a game board, complained a Kelthani survivor. It is not honorable. But Admiral Cho was firm. Honor and pride nearly got us all killed. You ran when things got difficult. We stayed and learned how to fight. If you want to fight with us, you fight our way. Commander Yang Sujin worked day and night in her laboratory, now assisted by alien scientists who had finally understood what the humans had been doing. The Vorthak brought their advanced quantum computers. The Mindari offered their pattern recognition abilities, Even the Kelthani contributed their detailed battle records. The key is unpredictability combined with sacrifice, Yang explained to a mixed group of human and alien officers. The Devourers adapt to patterns, but they cannot adapt to chaos that serves a purpose. She displayed her latest tactical analysis. Look at this data from our recent battles. Every time we combine tactics from multiple species in ways that seem random, their adaptation systems overload. Dr. Bei Yunji had been studying the psychological impact of humanity's victories. The other species are calling it the human method, she reported. They do not understand how we can accept such losses and still call it victory. Because we see the bigger picture, Admiral Cho replied. Every ship we lose, every battle we appear to lose, teaches us something new about the enemy. The others fight to win individual battles, we fight to win the war. The growing Allied fleet received its first real test when Devourer forces attacked the Rigel sector. 3 enemy fleets, over 2,000 ships, moved to crush a group of human colony worlds. This is our chance, Yang told Admiral Cho. We can test our new combined tactics with our returning allies. The battle that followed would be talked about for generations. Captain Nam Su-young led the first wave, a mixed force of human and Kelthani ships. They attacked the Devourer left flank using traditional Kelthani honor guard formations. As expected, the enemy adapted quickly, repositioning their ships to counter the frontal assault. But this time, the Kelthani ships did not fight to the death. When their shields failed and their weapons were depleted, they retreated in good order, transmitting everything they had learned to the second wave. Commander Park Do-hyun brought his squadron in from the opposite direction, using Vorthak energy rotation, patterns combined with human hit-and-run tactics. The Devourers tried to adapt, but their systems were still processing the Kelthani attack data. Enemy adaptation cycle is 11 seconds behind optimal, reported Yang from her command ship. Wave 3. Begin your approach. The third wave was the strangest combination yet. Mindari psychic coordination, human nuclear weapons, and Kelthani close combat techniques, all used by ships that had no business fighting together. The Devourer adaptation systems crashed completely. For 43 seconds, the most advanced fleet in Devourer history was helpless. In those 43 seconds, the combined Allied fleet tore them apart. Complete victory, reported Captain Lee Hagen from her scout position. 3 Devourer fleets destroyed, minimal Allied losses, enemy survivors fleeing the sector. The celebration lasted for hours. Alien crews who had been running for their lives were now cheering with human officers. Species that had given up hope were sending messages of congratulations, but Yang was not celebrating. She was studying the enemy retreat patterns on her display screens. They are learning, she told Admiral Cho privately. Not just adapting to our tactics, but learning from our strategy. Look at how they retreated. It was not random panic. They pulled back in good order, preserving their most important ships. What does that mean? Cho asked. It means they are starting to understand what we are doing. They know we are sacrificing battles to win the war. Next time, they will be ready for our psychological tactics too. The Admiral looked at the tactical display. Even with their new allies, the human-led fleet had fewer than 800 ships. Intelligence reports suggested the Devourers still had over 30,000 vessels spread across the galaxy. How much time do we have? He asked. Not long, Yang replied. We need to strike at their core systems before they finish analyzing our methods. Once they understand the human approach to warfare, they will adapt their entire strategy. Over the next several weeks, the Allied fleet began moving toward the galactic core, where intelligence suggested the main Devourer command centers were located. They fought a dozen smaller battles along the way, each one teaching them more about their enemy. Captain Seo Junsu destroyed a Devourer supply depot using Mindari illusion tactics combined with human explosive devices. Major Kim Yuna captured an enemy communication relay by leading Kelthani ground forces in what appeared to be a suicidal charge, only to have human orbital strikes eliminate the defenders at the last second. Each victory brought more survivors out of hiding. Species that had been written off as extinct sent small fleets to join the human-led alliance. The galaxy was beginning to believe that the Devourers could be defeated. But Yang's warnings proved correct. The enemy was learning. During the Battle of Proxima Station, the Devourers used humanity's own tactics against them. When the Allied fleet attacked using combined species formations, the enemy responded by splitting their forces and striking from multiple directions simultaneously. They had learned to create their own chaos. They are copying our unpredictability, Yang reported grimly after the battle. We won, but barely, and we lost 60 ships doing it. Admiral Cho studied the battle reports. The Devourers were no longer just adapting to specific tactics. They were learning to think like humans, to sacrifice short-term advantages for long-term strategic gains. How long before they surpass us? He asked. 6 months, maybe less, Yang replied. We need to end this war before they become better at being human than we are. Dr. Bei had disturbing news from her intelligence analysis. Admiral, I have been studying the Devourer communication patterns. They are not just learning our tactics, they are learning our psychology. The next time we face them, they will know exactly how we think. The Allied fleet paused at the edge of the galactic core, preparing for what everyone knew would be the final campaign. Either humanity would find a way to destroy the Devourer command centers, or the war would be lost forever. All ships, this is Admiral Cho, came the announcement over the fleet communications. Tomorrow we begin the assault on the Devourer home systems. Some of you joined us recently, others have been fighting since the beginning. But all of you are here, because you believe this war can be won. Through her bridge windows, Captain Lee, Heijin could see nearly 1,000 ships from 18 different species. They had come from across the galaxy to follow humanity into the heart of enemy territory. We fight not for glory or conquest, the Admiral continued, but for survival, for the right of life to exist in this galaxy. The Devourers have taken everything from us, our worlds, our people, our hope, but they could not take our will to fight. The alien crews listened in silence. Many of them had fled when the war began. They had watched their homeworlds burn while hiding in the darkness between stars. Now they were ready to follow the stubborn species that had refused to surrender. Tomorrow, we show the galaxy what happens when you push too hard against something that refuses to break. Tomorrow we roar. As the fleet prepared for the final assault, Yang made one last discovery that would change everything. Hidden in the quantum signatures of the destroyed Devourer supership was data that revealed the enemy's true purpose. Admiral, you need to see this, she called urgently. The data was incredible. The Devourers were not just destroying civilizations, they were preserving them. Every species they consumed, every world they stripped bare, all of it was being stored in vast digital archives. They are building a library, Yang said in amazement. Every form of life. The Devourer home system was unlike anything in the known galaxy. Where stars should have been, massive mechanical constructs harvested energy from captive suns. Where planets should have orbited, geometric structures the size of worlds processed, the remains of 1 billion civilizations, and at the center of it all, a sphere of pure quantum energy that hurt to look at directly. Sensors are going crazy, reported Lieutenant Kim Minju from the Indomitable's science station. The energy readings do not make sense. Captain Park Ji-yeon stood on the bridge of humanity's flagship, looking out at the most terrifying sight any living being had ever witnessed. Around her, the combined Allied fleet held formation, nearly 1,000 ships from 18 species united under human command. That sphere is their central processing core, Commander Yang Soo-jin explained over the communications channel from her analysis ship. Every piece of data they have collected, every digital copy of every destroyed civilization, it is all stored in there. Admiral Cho Yun-woo's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. All ships prepare for final assault. Remember, we are not just fighting for our own survival. We are fighting for the right of every species to remain alive and imperfect, rather than become digitally perfect and dead. The Devourer defenses were staggering. Thousands of mechanical ships patrolled the system's edge, each one the size of a small moon. Weapon platforms that could crack planets floated in perfect geometric patterns. Energy fields that could stop entire fleets created barriers around the most critical installations. "Sir, detecting massive enemy response," reported Commander Lee Hae-jin from her scout position. "Over 10,000 Devourer vessels moving to intercept us." This was it. The final battle. Everything humanity had learned, every sacrifice they had, made every desperate gamble they had taken, it all led to this moment. "All ships, attack formation ultimate," Admiral Cho ordered. "Every species, every tactic, everything we have learned. Show them what chaos with purpose looks like." The Allied fleet split into dozens of smaller formations, each one using different tactics from different species. Kelthani honor guards charged straight ahead, while Vorthak energy specialists attacked from the flanks. Mindari psychic coordinators linked with human tactical networks to create battle plans that changed every few seconds. It was beautiful and terrible and completely insane. The Devourer adaptation systems tried to process the incoming attack patterns, but there were too many variables. Human unpredictability, Kelthani honor, Vorthak precision, Mindari intuition, and a dozen other species fighting styles all combined into something that defied analysis. "Enemy adaptation systems are overloading," Yang reported. "But they are learning fast. We have maybe 30 minutes before they figure out how to counter this. 30 minutes to defeat an enemy that had consumed galaxies." The space around the system's outer edge erupted into the largest battle in galactic history. Thousands of ships fired millions of weapons while fighter craft swarmed like angry insects. Nuclear explosions lit up the darkness while energy beams cut through armor, like paper. But the Allied fleet was fighting with more than just weapons. They were fighting with everything that made life worth preserving. The Kelthani fought for honor, the Vorthak for knowledge, the Mindari for connection, and the humans fought for the stubborn refusal to accept that perfection was worth more than existence. "Captain, we are breaking through their outer defenses," reported Tactical Officer Yoon Dae-ho. "Path is clear to the central sphere." Park Ji-yeon looked at her tactical display. They had lost over 300 ships already, but the sacrifice was working. The Devourer defenses were designed to stop organized attacks, not the beautiful chaos of a dozen species fighting as one. "All ships follow the Indomitable," she ordered. "We are going for the core." The human flagship led a mixed formation of 200 vessels toward the quantum sphere at the system's heart. Behind them, the rest of the Allied fleet continued to engage the Devourer forces, buying time with their lives. As they approached the core, the true horror of what the Devourers had built became clear. The sphere was not just a storage device, it was a prison. Inside that quantum matrix were the digitized remains of every species the machines had ever consumed. Billions of civilizations reduced to data patterns, preserved forever but never again allowed to live and grow and change. "It is monstrous," whispered Dr. Bae Yoonji from her monitoring station. "They think they are saving these civilizations, but they have turned them into museum exhibits." The sphere's defenses were the most advanced the Devourers had ever created. Energy barriers that existed in multiple dimensions. Weapons that fired through time itself. Defensive systems that could predict attacks before they were even planned. "Our weapons are not even scratching it," reported Captain Nam Soo-young from his heavy cruiser. "The quantum barriers are absorbing everything we throw at them." Yang studied her sensor readings frantically. There had to be a way. Every system had a weakness, every design had a flaw. "Wait," she said suddenly. "The sphere is not just storing data, it is actively processing it. Running simulations, analyzing patterns, trying to understand what they have collected." "What does that mean?" Admiral Cho asked. "It means it is thinking, and if it is thinking, it can be confused." Yang's plan was the most desperate gambit yet attempted. Instead of attacking the sphere with weapons, they would attack it with information. They would feed it data that was so chaotic, so unpredictable, so perfectly human, that its processing systems would crash. "All ships open communication channels to the sphere," Yang ordered. "Not weapon channels, communication channels. We are going to talk to it." What followed was the strangest assault in galactic history. Instead of firing missiles and energy beams, the Allied fleet began broadcasting everything that made their civilizations unique. Human music and poetry. Kelthani war songs, Vorthak mathematical theorems, Mindari emotional resonances. They transmitted love letters and grocery lists, children's drawings and scientific papers, religious texts and dirty jokes. Everything that was random and beautiful and imperfect about living, changing, growing civilizations. The sphere's processing systems tried to analyze and categorize the incoming data, but it was impossible. How do you digitally preserve a mother's lullaby? How do you store the feeling of sunset on your homeworld? How do you catalog the moment when two beings fall in love? Quantum matrix is destabilizing, Yang reported with growing excitement. The processing core cannot handle data that refuses to be categorized. The sphere began to glow brighter, its surface crackling with energy discharges. Inside, the digitized remains of 1 billion civilizations stirred as the perfect order that imprisoned them began to break down. All ships, maximum transmission, Admiral Cho ordered. Give it everything we are, everything we have ever been, everything we hope to become. The Allied fleet poured their hearts and souls into the communication channels. Stories of triumph and failure, moments of joy and sorrow, dreams of futures that might never come to pass. All the messy, unpredictable, gloriously imperfect experiences that made life worth living. The sphere could not handle it. Its quantum matrix, designed to store perfect digital copies of dead civilizations, was being asked to process the living chaos of species that refused to be cataloged. The explosion, when it finally collapsed, was visible from 3 galaxies away. Captain, Park Ji-yeon felt her ship thrown backward by the shockwave as the quantum sphere tore itself apart. Around her, the bridge crew held on as reality itself seemed to bend and twist. When the light faded and the sensors cleared, the Devourer home system was gone. Not destroyed, but transformed. Where the mechanical constructs had been, new stars were being born. Where the geometric structures had floated, planets were forming from the liberated matter of 1 billion worlds. And throughout the galaxy, Devourer fleets simply stopped. Without their central processing core, without their connection to the quantum sphere, they became nothing more than empty machines drifting in space. "Sir, we are receiving transmissions from across the galaxy," reported Communications Officer Kim Da-yoon, her voice filled with wonder. "Every Devourer ship has gone silent. The war is over." But that was not the most incredible thing. "Admiral, you need to see this," Yang called urgently. "I am detecting something impossible." On her screens were energy signatures unlike anything they had ever seen. The destruction of the quantum sphere had not just freed the matter it contained, it had somehow released something else. The digital copies of destroyed civilizations were becoming real again, transforming back into living beings on newly formed worlds. Species that had been extinct for millions of years were being reborn. Civilizations that existed only as data. Patterns were returning to physical form. The galaxy was not just saved, it was being restored. "How is this possible?" Dr. Bay asked in amazement. "I think," Yang said slowly, "that some things are too important to be perfectly preserved. Some things need to be alive to truly exist." Over the following months, as the galaxy began to rebuild, humanity found itself in an unexpected position. The species that had once been abandoned by their allies, that had stood alone against impossible odds, was now looked to for leadership. The new Galactic Council was established on Earth, with Ambassador Kim Tae-hyun as its first Secretary General. "Boo,"